Welcome to the Echo Lab, the place where music's best-kept secrets come to light. In every episode, we uncover the overlooked legends, the underground classics, and the hidden influences that shape the soundtrack of generations. From cult bands and iconic session players to the untold stories behind timeless tracks. If you're a fan of deep cuts and deep dives, you're in the right place. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you never miss a beat. Let's get into the story behind the sound. Ozzy Osbourne, the man behind the Prince of Darkness. Part 2, Chaos, Cameras, and Legacy, the final act of Ozzy Osbourne. By the time the new millennium rolled around, Ozzy Osbourne was already a living legend, and not just in the world of rock. He'd survived the rise and fall of Black Sabbath, the chaos of the 80s, and somehow built a solo career that rivaled, and in some ways surpassed, his original band. But in the early 2000s, Ozzy was about to do something no one expected. He became a reality TV star. The Osbournes, which premiered on MTV in 2002, pulled back the curtain on the Prince of Darkness and showed the world. Well, a surprisingly relatable guy. Sure, he mumbled a lot. He had a hard time with the remote control. He wandered around his house yelling at the dogs. But that was the point. Ozzy wasn't some fire-breathing demon in a cape. He was a husband, a dad, a guy trying to keep his sanity in a house full of chaos. And people loved it. The show became a cultural phenomenon. Millions tune in each week to watch Ozzy argue with Sharon, discipline his kids, and mutter hilarious one-liners. For a generation of fans, this was their first real exposure to Ozzy, not through Sabbath or Blizzard of Oz, but through the lens of reality TV. The show won an Emmy. Ozzy became a household name in an entirely new way. And suddenly, the guy who used to be banned from cities for biting heads off animals was now America's favorite eccentric dad. But behind the scenes, life wasn't all laughs. Ozzy still battled addiction. Years of hard living had taken their toll. He relapsed multiple times, and health issues were starting to creep in. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's, suffered a serious fall, and underwent multiple surgeries. But true to form, he never stopped pushing forward. Musically, Ozzy kept grinding. He released Down to Earth in 2001, which featured the hit Dreamer, a piano-driven ballad that showed a more introspective, even vulnerable side. It wasn't the heaviest song in his catalog, but it struck a chord with fans who had grown up alongside him. And then there was Ozzfest, launched by Sharon in 1996 as a way to give Ozzy and other heavy bands a proper touring platform. Ozzfest quickly grew into one of the biggest metal festivals in the world. It gave bands like Slipknot, System of a Down, and Disturbed massive exposure, and proved that heavy music still had a thriving, loyal fan base. Ozzy wasn't just a performer anymore. He was a curator, a kingmaker. And Ozzfest showed that even as trends shifted, Ozzy's influence still ran deep. As the 2010s rolled on, Ozzy Osbourne faced a battle that was no longer just about music. It was about health, endurance, and the toll of decades lived at full throttle. But if there's one thing Ozzy never did, it was give up. He kept working, kept touring, and kept finding new ways to stay relevant. In 2010, he released Scream, an album that brought a fresh sound without abandoning his roots. Tracks like Let Me Hear You Scream reminded fans that Ozzy could still bring the thunder, even as he stared down the challenges of aging and illness. Around this time, there were whispers. Would there ever be another Black Sabbath record? The answer came in 2013 with the release of 13. It was Sabbath's first full-length studio album with Ozzy since 1978, and despite the decades apart, the magic was still there. Heavy, sludgy, doom-laden riffs, lyrics soaked in darkness and dread. It was a powerful reminder of what the band had created and what they still had to offer. The album debuted at #1 in the UK and the US. Not bad for a bunch of guys who had helped invent metal over 40 years earlier. That reunion tour and the later The End tour was a fitting farewell. The band took a final bow in their hometown of Birmingham in 2017. It was emotional, it was loud, it was honest, and it felt right. But Ozzy wasn't quite ready to hang it up. In 2020, after a long, quiet stretch, he released Ordinary Man. It was reflective, melodic, and featured collaborations with artists like Elton John, Post Malone, and Slash. The title track with Elton was especially poignant. Two aging legends contemplating mortality, fame, and the passage of time. Then came Patient Number 9 in 2022, another late career triumph. Ozzy brought in legends like Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, Zakk Wylde, and Tony Iommi, bridging generations and genres. Even with health setbacks, he was still stretching creatively, still chasing that spark. He'd always said he didn't want to die an ordinary man, and he never did. On November 12, 2024, the world lost one of its most iconic, chaotic, and unexpectedly endearing figures in rock history. Ozzy Osbourne passed away at the age of 75, a milestone that once seemed impossible for a man who defied death, logic, and expectations for most of his life. And yet, when the news broke, it still hit like a thunderclap, because no matter how much we joked about Ozzy's immortality, deep down we thought he might just outlive us all. Tributes poured in from across the globe, not just from metalheads or musicians, but from actors, comedians, athletes, and everyday fans. People who'd never even been into heavy music still had an Ozzy story. Maybe it was watching the Osbournes and feeling like they were part of family. Maybe it was catching him on a festival stage, shirtless and screaming into the night, and realizing they were witnessing something larger than life. Ozzy's legacy isn't just in the riffs or the records, though there's plenty of both. It's in the attitude, the heart, the contradiction. He was a prince of darkness, who loved puppies. He bit the head off a bat, and then cried in interviews talking about his kids. He stumbled through hotel hallways, but stood tall on stage in front of hundreds of thousands. That contradiction is what made him human, and it's what made him resonate beyond the metal world. Ozzy was never about perfection. He wasn't the most technically gifted singer. He wasn't a philosopher, but he had soul. He had charisma. He had a raw honesty that cut through the noise. And for all the chaos, the arrests, the drugs, the injuries, the reality show meltdowns, he kept coming back, again and again, like some indestructible force of nature. In the end, Ozzy Osbourne wasn't just a metal icon. He was a cultural one. He helped invent a genre, redefine what a frontman could be, and managed, somehow, to stay true to himself in a business that devours originality. He was funny. He was dark. He was wild. He was vulnerable. And above all, he was real. So when we crank up Crazy Train or War Pigs or No More Tears, we're not just hearing songs. We're hearing the sound of a life lived without filters. A man who never claimed to be perfect, just passionate, unpredictable, and completely himself. Ozzy wasn't here to follow the rules. He was here to shake things up, to leave a mark, and maybe stumble through a few hotel hallways on the way there. And somehow, against every odd, he did it all with a crooked grin, a batty legacy, and a whole lot of heart. He may be gone now, but trust me, Ozzy Osbourne isn't fading quietly into history. He's in the DNA of every riff that dares to be bold, every performer who embraces the chaos, every fan who finds a little bit of light in the dark. Because legends like Ozzy, they don't just disappear. They echo forever. Rest in peace, Ozzy. Thanks for hanging out with the Echo Lab. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast app or watching on YouTube, we appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, and drop a review or comment to let us know what you think. Got a band, topic, or a deep cut you want featured? Shoot us a message. Until next time, this is the Echo Lab, where we dive into the story behind the sound.